community has also become this angry, whiny group of people that are just mad at everything. And it's actually
All right, welcome to another episode of the Fat Games podcast. Today we have a special guest. He is someone that we've had on the podcast before. Very colorful character, Red Vonix.
Yes, Red's good. Red was we had a great conversation with Red today. But before we get into that, Gary, you're looking a little worse for wear. What have you been up to all week?
What do you mean? Are we gonna talk about my gauntlet of holiday parties that I've had since last Saturday?
Yeah, you're looking a little tired.
I pretty much have had parties since last Saturday every day up until now. So
Tis the season.
it's wearing on me.
You're not as young as you used to be. I get it.
Well, I don't think I would have done or fared that well even back in the day. So
Right. So what did we talk about with Red today?
we
We talked
went
about a
over
lot.
a lot of different topics. He has two companies that he's doing. One is focused on porting games. The other one is game development. So he went into a little bit about what he's doing with those. He talked a lot about game engines, I guess, for the last little bit of the
Well,
podcast.
yeah, we covered a lot about the Unity stuff. Again, we talked about that on our last podcast, but we got a lot more into it in this podcast. I pushed Red on some of the specific topics. I personally am skeptical of Red's point of view, but I'm certain there is a bit of an impact of the ongoing sort of Unity debacle and what it'll have on the industry. But I don't think it's going to be a massive impact, and that's basically my take on it. But I think it did ruffle a lot of feathers and create a lot of nervous game devs out there.
Well, at the end of the day, only time will tell, right? So, but he's a passionate individual, and it'll show.
It will show. But before we get into that, Gary, we should do a quick update on Karendow and what we're going to do in the podcast for next year, assuming we're going to keep doing it. So
Oh,
the game we're going to keep doing. I would love to get the game done faster than our current targets are now. We're making some incredible progress. Wouldn't you agree?
well, I would say that you've spent a lot of effort in this last little bit to polishing the game in terms of the aesthetics, the way the battle engine plays out. I think you've made some tweaks to that too, right?
There isn't a thing to there isn't a single aspect to this game that hasn't gotten touched in the last 6 months.
Yeah, it almost
Make
looks
it
like
better.
it almost looks like a different game. But every year I find this game looks and plays better and better. And this, I would say this year has been the most exciting.
Yeah. Well, we did a lot of investment in it, and there's some subquests in the game. There's a lot of subquests in the game now. I can't believe it. There's probably like 10 now. In the first, I want to say 5 hours, like 10 that you can do. You can't necessarily complete them. The visuals of the game are something else. We've touched up on a lot of the dialogue. We've completed all of the magic in the game. The skills are in flight, where those will take a little bit longer. Just everything is just
Everything
flowing really
everything about it is
well.
better. I like personally using Super Slash. I think that's a really cool skill to use.
It looks cool too.
Well, that's what I mean. I look forward to using it because it's really cool.
Absolutely. And I want to get this game done a lot faster than what we're predicting. So
Yeah,
that I
we were
think
predicting originally 20 years, and
20,
then
no, no, no,
we got
no, no.
what
That's
eight
what you
back.
were predicting. I was never predicting that. I wanted to get this game done between 2027 and 28. And if we look at porting, localization, testing, I feel like it could be longer than that. And I don't want it to be longer than that. So something is probably going to have to change in terms of our approach to getting this game done. And I'm not going to sacrifice quality or content necessarily to do it. So we'll talk more. I think that will be a major conversation for the podcast in 2024. And also in the podcast, I actually want to still have some great guests, but I also want to focus it on current events and gaming news because specifically with this Unity stuff this year, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. And if we bring on guests to talk about that, I think it'll help us. It'll get an audience for sure, but also talk about, just interesting stuff that'll may impact us. So I think it's maybe a better direction to take the podcast going forward.
Okay, yeah, I agree.
All right, Gary, should we bring in Red and
Let's
have some
get to
fun?
it.
Red, welcome back.
Welcome back, Mr. Red.
It's been a
Pleasure to
while.
be here.
The last
It's been like
time the last time you were on, we were talking about some unmentionables, some
Unmentionables.
adult based games, which was one of our most listened to podcasts we've ever done. Also got us flagged by YouTube. So we are going to play that game where we dance around the topic without actually saying what we talked about in the last podcast. But you can always go back and listen to it if you're an adult.
which I am. I want to listen to it.
So we're really glad to have you back. But for those of you who don't know who you are, let's start with some introductions. Who are you, Red? And why are you here?
Well, I am Red Vonix. I've been in the industry for 20 some years now. I've worked on numerous projects, all kinds of different ones, video games, non-video games, applications, theme parks, museums. I've been to China working on a theme park. It's been a great time. I run my own company called Cerulean Games, which has a sister company called Drunk Robot Games. Cerulean Games does a lot of B2B stuff. We've been doing a lot of work you may all have heard of recently because we've been focusing on console ports, especially ones for Puppet Combo. Like we worked on Night at the Gates of Hell and Bloodwash and No One Lives Under the Lighthouse. And currently we have 4 in production unannounced ports for various companies I can't talk about yet because NDA ink is still wet, but trust me, we got some really awesome stuff in the pipeline. And of course, Drunk Robot Games, we got our fun Match 3 premium visual novel Match 3 Runic coming hot and heavy early next year, which we're going to be talking about here in a bit. But yeah, I've got a long fun career.
I think some of that is even stuff I didn't even know about. But let's actually start with something a little fun. How did we meet again?
How did we
Three
meet?
of us
That
meet.
would have been Gamer X4, I do believe.
I think
Wasn't it? Was it Mac?
3. It was 3, I think. Or
Okay,
was
yeah.
it?
Well, I know that I met Red in
Oh no, it was 4. You're right.
2016.
Yeah, that was 4.
Yeah, because at the time I was working with Midboss on the console ports of read-only memories. In fact, I worked on the console ports of read-only memories along with just doing a bunch of product updates and bug fixes and things for them as well. And so when they told me about Gamer X4, it's like, hey, I got this dumb little Capitato game I've been working on for my entire life. Can I show it off there? And actually, that's not true because that was the first time we ever showed it off. At the time, I'd been working on it for like 6 months.
That was your first time showing it?
That was the first time showing it ever, which is why it was so bad. But yeah,
I remember yeah, we were next to each other.
Bad?
I don't think it was bad.
We remember this very differently. But your table was right next to mine, and I was like, "Who's that cute dude over there? We should hang out." And kind of went from there. And we've been friends ever since.
It's been it's been 7 years now. Wow. Time flies. Time
really
flies.
does. Yet we don't look a day older. How do we do that? What souls we consume?
Yeah, souls are the blood of children, but that's not appropriate to say in a podcast.
Oh, man,
anyway,
flag now.
Yeah, we just got flagged probably.
1-800 YouTube.
All right. So you said a whole bunch of stuff about Runic that I've never heard about before. A visual novel narrative Match 3. Were those your words?
Yes. That's
okay. Let's talk about Runic.
The Match 3 element is still the core gameplay. And of course, we're not just, 1, 2, 3 match. We're patterns and everything. So it's, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a 2x2 block, an L shape, and a bunch of others. And as you match those, you get these little like power pieces. And those power pieces you can use in other matches to do different things. Like maybe one will take out an entire column or entire row. Another one might act intelligently and based on what's in the current stage, figure out the best piece to pop anywhere on the board. But then if you take two of those power-ups and you swap them, you get an overload where every single possible combination of pieces has its own overload. So maybe you swap two lightning bolts, you might do a full cross. Or if you swap two other pieces, it might clear the entire board.
I feel like I saw that in the trailer and had no idea what was going on. So that's some good context.
Exactly.
Now it's premium, so it's not freemium, thank God.
Nope,
So
none of this advertising crap. No in-app purchases. No draining your life savings just to win. No, you buy it once, enjoy. We're not
that
going to
is
waste
my
your
kind of game.
Awesome.
Do you have a release date for it yet?
Q2 2024.
Okay, well, that's not
We're gonna
very far
start-
off.
Yeah,
Is
we're gonna
that
start
tentative or is it formally announced?
tentative. Really, the main thing is we're going to be starting our submissions to the various console certification processes here around the end of January, and that could take anywhere between 1 and 3 months to 47 years, depending how long and angry they want to be about different things. But at
Yeah.
the same time, we've done we're on our 10th or 11th console port now for clients, so we kind of have a good grasp on it, so it shouldn't be too crazy long for us.
What kind of stuff do they usually ask for? I mean, I remember when I went to the Apple certification with Burgle's Bounty, and that's when I realized they actually played the game because they discovered that there was no a way to restore your purchases because there you could use the you could buy like in-game currency, and I had to have a way to restore purchases if you did that. So and then they flagged me on that, so I had to actually code that functionality in.
I got to be a little careful here just because this is crossing into NDA territory with the
Gotcha.
platforms, but I can mention from a high level things like there's terminology guidelines, like if you have a controller such as this one here that I just happen to have sitting by me,
Oh,
when
convenient.
you mention what this is or what this is, it needs to be consistent. And they have particular rules and what it is called in different languages in different countries. And you have to make sure you use those guidelines. That way, if I say what an A button is, we know it's an A button.
So the action button or something, or
Correct. In every language, and every language again has their own phrasing for that. And the various companies, rightfully enough, want it to be consistent between all games. So your game shouldn't be saying like this is the A slapper when another game says it's the A button. So no A slappers allowed. So that's a big one. A lot of times it's just stability. Like if your game is crashing or something, that looks bad on
Yeah.
the company. Especially if you're on one platform and it's stable and you're on another one and it's crashing, that looks bad. I mean, it looks bad on you as a company
Yeah.
or as a console porting or something, but it also looks bad on them as well. So they watch for things
Well,
like that.
I
They
have
have a bunch
noticed.
of
Go ahead, sorry.
And they have a bunch of their own internal guidelines, and those I definitely cannot mention without losing my licenses over NDAs. But I can tell you that they are very rigid and very strict.
Well,
Which
I always find that the Switch port is always the worst one. And I don't feel like it has to be that way. I feel like they just put the least effort into it.
it's true, and there's a console port that Sterling Games are doing right now. I can't say what it is yet because it hasn't been announced. But when it is announced, I promise you, it's going to actually be a big deal, and a lot of people are going to recognize this title. I'm actually really excited we got this gig. But on that's actually been an interesting one because it's a really graphically intensive game, and you load it up on a lot of the platforms, and it runs fine. Then you put it on Switch, and your Switch just I got like a chart.
Lights on fire.
Yeah, so we had to do a lot to make it run very well on the Switch for that. And yeah, I've seen exactly what you're talking about. You look at a lot of console ports that various companies have done, and the Switch version is just trash. And because a lot of times they don't want to take the time to do it, which depending on the game sometimes makes sense because the Switch sales are going to be either good or bad. It's going to depend on the game. I know personally with Sterling Games, we are going to do the best on all platforms. I mean, we're also a small company. We kind of got to make sure we're putting our best foot forward, but But no, yeah, it's what you said. A lot of companies really don't do what they can on Switch because it's also a lot more work and it's harder. So you kind of have to really know what you're doing to get those optimizations in.
Good to know, as I'm sure that will be in our future, Gary.
Yep,
What,
we'll
Switch?
be here waiting, waiting.
Let's talk more about our favorite cat, Potato Mutant. Tell me, how is my favorite cat, Potato Mutant, doing?
Going through some changes. Obviously we haven't been too noisy about it over the past couple years because we were basically just quietly working on it. And we're making good progress and everything. And then this one company decided to mess everything up. Uh, any guesses on which company I'm talking about?
Well, I definitely want to get into this because I know where you're going. But let's talk a little bit more about Purrtato.
Okay.
Was it is that okay or
Yeah. I'm going to touch on that slightly though, for just because
sure?
it's
Yeah.
part of what we're working on. So one thing led to another, and unfortunately, we were forced to change game engines with Purrtato. So we're moving it from Unity to Unreal. And in doing this, it actually became a bit of a boon because despite working on Purrtato for so long, as I mentioned before, despite the consumers adoring the game and people wanting to throw money at a finished product, publishers never believed in it. And developers with money never believed in it. And it really changed how we had to do things. We had to do a lot internally. And I not maybe not the best, but I ended up
Why do you think they didn't believe in it?
this is actually something we've been finding consistently. We've been talking with a lot of other developers on, and it's kind of an interesting problem. And I definitely don't want to shit on any publishers here because I know a lot of publishers. I'm friends with them, and they're great people. But from what I'm hearing consistently from a lot of other game developers and what we're experiencing as well, a lot of publishers are losing vision. Like there's a lot of games out there that are being produced where the public audience is just clamoring for this release title with so these titles are predicting to make some pretty good money, but then you take it to the publishers and the publishers say we just don't really see a product here or we don't see the ability to make money with this and things like that. And it's something that's within Cerulean Games and Drunker Robot Games we're thinking heavily about and how to address this, not just for ourselves, but for game developers in general, especially the numerous tens and hundreds and potentially thousands of game devs with games the public wants badly, but publishers don't see a product in.
Did you have the same issue with Runic?
Yes, we did. We actually submitted the game to numerous publishers and zero accepted it. And it's been interesting because, we're working with actual Hollywood talent on the game, Hollywood talent who have a history of working in games. And they are baffled. They cannot figure out why publishers will not accept this game. And again, it's the same thing we had with Purrtato. So we're making some company changes, and I'm not quite ready to talk about them yet, but we're going to be doing some stuff that puts us on the radar and addresses this, not just for ourselves, but for everyone.
Sounds good. But so going back to it's like, is it is it a macroeconomic thing that the publishers are afraid of? They're just afraid of taking chances? Because I mean, Potato Tale isn't exactly. I mean, well, it is. It's like basically a Metroidvania, but it's got a bit of a twist to it. So it's not immediately recognizable. Are we seeing sort of a move from publishers going away from like what we traditionally call indie to calling, I guess, what's safe, which is less indie if you really look at it? Is the indie sort of scene not really indie anymore?
What indie is, nobody knows anymore, I don't think. And I understand this came up recently, and I haven't watched a lot of the recent Game Award shows and everything, but I understand there was, I'm forgetting which one of the really big indie titles, but they had a publisher or something. I don't remember the specifics, but I know there's a lot of issues about that. And then depending who you ask, I have quite literally heard id Software considered an indie company. And they are based on the description you use for what indie is.
Well, they're
And that's the
small,
thing.
but
What even
they
is
create.
indie?
Give me Doom, man. They're not small. I mean,
If you use the description of indie where it is a company not formally affiliated with the publisher, and I know that's changed for id now, but you know, like 10 years ago, I don't think they were partnered with what is it, Activision? One of the, I forget
yeah, I'm not
on my
sure.
head, but they would have been considered indie based on that description of indie. And then other people say, well, an indie company is one that makes under X dollars a year. I mean, you look at my company, based on the description of indie, my company is indie, or we're not. We're actually like a full company or something. So, what is indie? And
Who's coming up with these descriptions or these definitions anyway?
you know, I think people are just reaching up the pooper and feeling around to see what they can get. Because these descriptions are literally all over the place. And I
Like
know
I
I
hear the
personally
term triple I as well, which is like a well-funded, like it's basically a small studio.
that's actually new one to me. But I get it. um, and I know one of the things I've seen with indie as well. I mean, like I've heard people say we are indie priced, but then the prices they're like, oh yeah, we're like $35 for this or that, and I'm like, what? No, 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 that's way too low. Even indie should have more money than that. And like I have the problem with a lot of you know the artists out there that like, oh, I'll do this piece of art for $35. I'm like, how long does it take you to make? Like, oh, like 6 or 7 hours. I'm like, have you thought about your profit margin there? So I usually end up paying people a lot more than they ask for just because of that. I feel bad paying that little. But then in addition, one of the issues I've also seen with indie, I've actually been trying to separate myself from indie more and more the past years because a lot of times indie is also I've seen in a lot, not all cases, but in a lot of cases, indie has also become this angry, whiny group of people that are just mad at everything. And it's
They
actually reasons
become the
like
internets.
yeah, it's reasons for that I've actually dropped off Twitter for the majority of it because I'm scrolling Twitter, I'm like mute, 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 because it just it's I'm just going through Twitter and it's just people are just hateful about everything, every little thing, so angry, and I'm like, I'm not here for that. And I get shit's bad, people, especially for a lot of people, but we can't focus on the bad so much. And I see a lot of that with the indie group.
Being an
I just
artist has always been hard. It doesn't matter when you grew up, what you're doing. The
Mhm.
vast majority of artists are poor.
And that's true. It's definitely true. And but sadly at the same time, that goes back to what I had said before, where like I'm paying an artist where they ask me like for like $35 for a piece of art, and I'm like, this does not match the
Yeah.
profit margin for
A
what we
lot, a
should
lot
be.
of artists are also bad business people too, which is
Yes, and
unfortunate.
I have bluntly reached out to artists I'm friends with or that I've even hired and said, okay, we got to talk about your pricing structure. You've got to increase this. For one, your shit's amazing, and two, you're not making any money here. You're broke. Let's fix this for you. Let's figure out how we can make you more successful. So I don't know. Indie is a very complex topic, obviously, and I don't have the answers despite me kind of being in that world. But at the same time, like I said, I'm trying to back away from being referred to as indie only because what the fuck even is indie?
Well, in the last 10 years, like since Indie Game the movie came out, it's been a little over 10 years, I think.
I forgot about that. That was
Yeah,
quite
but that's when it really put the indie scene on the map, I think. That's my
yeah.
take on it. Well, first of all, is indie really even relevant in the terms of just using that word? Or are the current people who play games will just play any game now and sort of accept that it maybe is like sprite-based 2D, maybe doesn't have the same budget, or they're just going out there to like have fun.
I think the difference is when you get into the esports world. Esports players want the most gorgeous pixels imaginable.
I can
Um,
see that. There's one very popular game that's in the esports space.
Of course, there's like League of Legends
That's
and
the one, yeah.
Overwatch. Like those games, they're really, really pretty. The artists did a fantastic job on those, and same with the graphical engineers. Um, but at the same time, I would have a hard time, and I could be wrong about this, but I would have a hard time believing that if one of those looked like Vampire Survivors, it would get the same traction. But that might also be me starting to think like how I think some of the publishers are thinking, where I'm willing to bet a lot of publishers looked at Vampire Survivors and said, this is nothing. And they probably didn't even play it. And now it's one of the most successful games currently.
Does it do you think publishers just literally just go by looks alone now? Is that what you're sort of
I think it's part of it. But it's not only part of it, because a frustrating thing I found is that getting feedback from publishers on a title they reject
really hard?
is almost impossible, but not entirely impossible. I have had publishers that have given us feedback, and I always reach out to them. I say, thank you so much for saying this. We really appreciate it, because most don't. And I will say that for our games, they've pretty much never mentioned the art. They've always said that the game is pretty. And that, so like Purrtato, they all like the art. Runic, they all like the art. It's been other things that they had problems with, but at the same time,
feedback then? If because they gave it to you, was it actionable? Was it something?
not always. A lot of times, it's things like on Runic, for example, we don't have the capabilities to budget to market a match 3 title. I'm like,
I mean that's fair.
that's a very odd piece of feedback.
Well,
That or
well, I guess if you think about it from their perspective, match 3 games, it's a very saturated market, arguably oversaturated. So
it is.
how do they market? Although Runic is unique and very good looking, how though do they make it rise to the top above all the others? And that's probably something you're thinking about right now.
Oh yeah, we already know how to do that. I mean, first off, we've got the visual novel component in there. We are console focused from the day one. We have a lot in there built with sitting on your couch playing this on like a PS5 or something, or whatever consoles we ship on, in mind. This is not a game to be sitting there on the toilet playing. So there's a lot that can be taken from just that alone. But I know also, I do wonder how many publishers have actually played the game.
And also, how do you pitch that to a publisher? You're sending them an email with maybe a pitch deck, and it's hard for that necessarily to come across.
It can be, and that's where I would hope that they're playing. But this kind of goes in what we were talking about. I think we talked about previous podcast. Excuse me. In a previous podcast where I believe we discussed my issues with judging at game events.
Getting to Megfest, because I'd love to talk about that.
And I've kind of did my own research, and I'm not going to get any names. I'm not going to say anything specific because I'm not going to put anybody on the spot. But I definitely found there was a lot of favoritism going on. There was a lot of judges who were literally not even playing the games they were judging. They're watching the video and judging it based on that, which to me is wildly unacceptable.
That's unethical. That's unethical. Yeah.
And talking to a lot of other developers, they agree that it is unethical and it's unacceptable. But talking to judges, I was told by judges, we have to judge so many games, we don't have the time to play them all. So I said, I need to put my money where my mouth is. So I've been the judge on a number of events now. There's one event that isn't out yet, so I don't think I can talk about that one, but I was judge for MagFest last year. I've been judge on a number of other events. Names are.
Oh, did you play our game? Karendow? We were there last year.
I was not assigned it, sorry. But even if it was yours, I wouldn't have played favoritism. I would have played it proper. And that's the thing. I told myself, okay, I'm going to go into this and I'm going to do what all the judges tell me they can't do. Play every fucking game. So I played every game I was given, and I gave them a proper, I actually gave them feedback.
Yeah.
I did everything I said judges should do. And I am insanely busy. I run 2 companies, plus I have a day job, and I try and have a life on the side, and I still manage to judge all the games I was given.
I played every game for MagFest. I judged this year for 2024's MagFest, and I played every game. At least every game that I could, because my laptop would not run one of them. And I said, I think this needs a proper gaming PC. And I didn't reject it. I just said, assign this to someone else.
Blair, how many games did you play?
I think I played 14 or 15.
Yeah, I
And
was given 15
how
also.
long?
Anywhere between 15 minutes to an hour, depends on the game.
So,
If I got the gist of the game right away and it would present itself right away and I could give it a good score or knew what score I wanted to give it right away, I would. And I would. And I was so upset because they gave me a Mega Man style platformer game and is having a lot of fun at it. And then like it disappeared off my queue. They gave it to
oh
someone
no.
else. I'm like, oh, I wanted that. I wanted that game.
So this is my point exactly, though. I mean, we're busy people, and I'm not sure how busy you are, but me, I mean, I barely have time to sleep. Not even joking with how much I have going on. I still managed to play every game I was assigned, and I could have taken on more. So to hear these judges consistently say, "Oh, we don't have the time," uh, then get the fuck out of the competition and stop being a judge, you lazy fuck. You're being an unethical piece of shit. I'm just gonna say it. Now, taking that and taking
I
it to
don't
publishing.
disagree. I don't disagree. If they're not playing the games and just going because the video is the video and like these games are still in development. A lot of them don't even have a proper
Right.
trailer yet.
So taking us now to publishers, and this is something I think I've kind of caught some of them in. In reading some of the feedback, the feedback I was given, they're talking about certain things that aren't in the game or aren't there, and I'm going, yeah, it is. You experienced that 5 minutes in. You didn't actually play the game, did you? You only looked at the trailer. And I'm
Did you
sure
call them
publishers
on
get
it?
a lot more games, but if you're going to be a publisher, you can't, if you're going to be a publisher of interactive media, you cannot judge a title based on video alone. If you're going to do that, go work in film. This is not the film industry. You need to be playing the game if you're going to properly judge it for an event or for publishing. And if you're not doing that, get the fuck out of the industry. Go work in film. That's what I
I
had to say about
I
that.
mean, I don't disagree, but let's get on to our next favorite topic because we sort of brushed on this a little bit.
Yeah.
Our your favorite company, Unity. Uh, um, so Unity, as and Gary and I talked about this in the last podcast, and I don't think we did it justice at all. In fact, I actually said a bunch of wrong information on it. So if you're
Oh
listening
no,
to that podcast, or if anyone who's watching us listen to that podcast, ignore what I said. I got some stuff wrong.
you
Um,
got busted.
what's that?
You got busted.
No, I didn't get busted. I just went back and realized, I reread a bunch of stuff and realized what I said was wrong. So I apologize. I have misrepresented myself on this podcast now a couple times, but that's just part of doing the thing.
Yeah, the fact you're calling yourself out though and fixing it for yourself and being honest about it, this shows how good of a host you are.
Well,
And
I
how
try
good of a
to,
person you
Yeah,
are
Blair,
too.
I
A lot of
forgive
people
you.
just double down on their bullshit.
yeah, no, I try to be a person of integrity as much as I can. Anyway, so Unity, uh, when the whole Unity debacle happened, and I think it's fair to call it a debacle because the communication around it was basically horrific. They dropped the bombshell. There wasn't a lot of good information available on Unity's policy on their basically their runtime environment fee, I think is the best way to frame it. And it left a bunch of people confused and scared, I think. It scared the crap out of a lot of people in the indie scene. There were a lot of people at Gumbo who were waving their arms in the air. Oh, we'll never get a publisher. Oh, Unity is the worst platform to use for game development. And there's people who are I know who are looking for publishers right now for their games. Not you, Red, but other people I know who've struggled, and I've heard them anecdotally blame the Unity stuff on that. I don't know if that's true because if I look at this rationally and logically and from a business perspective, based on the most recent information, because Unity actually has released updated information on their policy around this, it doesn't make much sense to me. Like, I don't think people should be running for the hills. I think Unity did a terrible job introducing this policy, but the people it affects the most. Now, and I'll elaborate this in a second here. the people Unity's policy affects the most are basically AAA companies, AAA publishers, and then I would say, okay, because we just talked about how you can't define indie anymore. Just I would say, let's call them middle class game developers who gross over 1 million. And to me, the 2.5%, because their policy is we're going to charge 2.5% annually based on your game's revenue. If for any game that makes over 1 million, they are not charging anyone who makes less than that anything, and they're only charging people who are using Unity version 2024. So anyone who releases on an earlier platform isn't going to get charged for this. Anyone who makes less than 1 million isn't going to get charged for this. Anyone on like the Unity Basic license, I think it's called, basically the free license, won't get charged, but they will have to upgrade their license if they now make over 200,000 instead of 100,000 before that. But that's just a license upgrade, and then if they make 1 million, then they'll be subject to this new policy. So I don't think this is inherently unfair. I think the communication around it and the confusion it caused was not great, but I don't think Unity's policy is necessarily bad. Now, Red, over to you. First of all, can you hear my cat meowing?
I thought that was mine.
Okay, so you can hear it. It's coming through.
I can't hear it.
So, oh my God, where do we start here?
Anywhere.
Anger Cat had to come out here.
Anger Cat, okay.
Anger Cat is here because Anger Cat is angry. Everything you've said is correct, but I think you're missing this giant list of things here that I will not put on my screen because I don't have a post box set up. Let's do this. I'm trying to think of the best way to go through it because there's so many topics to go through, but it all comes down to
why don't we start with the publishing concern? Because
okay,
I know you've even mentioned that before, or even
Yeah.
earlier, that could have been an influencing factor.
So the publishers that I'm friends with, the publishers I've spoken to in the past about things, they admitted to me that they are not sure what to do about the Unity situation because even with Unity changing or backpedaling on this isn't the first time Unity has tried to retroactively do terms of service changes. This is just the worst and the loudest.
But is it retroactive when they say it only takes place on the latest version of Unity?
Yeah, but that doesn't work for console companies. For console porting, you have particular SDK windows you have to work within, and there are particular Unity versions that work with particular console SDKs. So it is actually impossible for me to stick with a version, even if it's LTS.
Okay, so now let's also talk about that a little bit. So now this is a blanket policy from Unity, but if you are a big company like Nintendo, Sony, Sega, Microsoft, all the Sega not anymore. Sorry, my cat is walking on my lap right now, so this is going to be
It's my part of it. They're also mad at Unity.
Hi,
Oh,
everyone watching the podcast can meet my cat now. All right. So they must have their own licensing agreements with Unity that affect any game that they put on their platform.
They do, and that's one that I don't think I can talk too much about just because NDAs, but I kind of know what.
But even in general, let's forget about NDAs. I mean, I think this policy is just going to is a blanket policy they're setting forth, and that's going to impact. I think the biggest people it's going to impact are mid-tier publishers. They make some money, not enough to negotiate with Unity directly for a better deal, but they make some money, and they're going to pay the extra $25,000 per million that they sell with the game. Now, if every one of their games only sells $900,000 worth of, or makes $900,000 worth of revenue, they will never pay a dime in this licensing structure. So I don't know.
You have to remember also is that, like I said, this is not the first time Unity has done retroactive TOS changes. And I'm amazed nobody talked about some of the other ones. Like one of the ones that affected my company was roughly a year and a half ago. Unity just out of the blue suddenly said you now need to have pro licenses to bring games to any consoles. As a result, it doubled my company's burn rate.
Oh, is that
And
still the
over
case?
half
Because I
my
don't have a pro license.
and over half my company's burn rate is now just Unity licenses.
Is that still in play? Still in effect?
Yeah.
So would a
One of the
publisher
reasons I'd love to
typically
get
pay
all my
for that
clients.
when they wanna port a game to consoles? So that
Sorry,
would
we were talking
typically,
to each other. Go again.
would that typically fall under a publisher to cover that license? Would that do any publishers have a bring your own license policy, or do the publishers cover it typically?
It depends what you're doing. If the publisher is actually doing the console porting themselves, then they need to have the license. Since my company does the console ports, we have to have those licenses.
So okay, yeah, so that would be expensive.
So there's
Um,
that. But and again, Unity has done other things in the past. So what it basically comes down to for myself and a lot of other devs I know is at this point, Unity has lost our trust so many times. And they've done so many things like this. And they've done so many retroactive terms of service changes. And every time they do it, we've always said we're going to start looking at other engines, and then we don't. And we always get back in this situation. So this one being the biggest and the worst, a lot of us have finally said, you know what, that's enough.
but what do
And
you say how they respond to the backlash? Because I think they did respond fairly well. They did a far better job of articulating the new policy.
not really.
I don't know if you read their most recent FAQ, because there was one that was published. I don't know when it was published, but I just read it today, and I thought it was very clear on what the requirements were to have to pay for the runtime environment fee.
I don't think I've read the most recent, and honestly, it's because at this point I just don't trust Unity at all. There's, a year from now they might just delete that and change it again, and change it again, and change it again, and they've done this so many times that literally I don't trust.
Even with all the backlash they got this time,
they got backlash the other times too.
I mean, this
is nothing different. This is just the worst backlash they've gotten. But the other thing is also, some of the developer groups I'm part of, they've done surveys amongst companies big and small to see things that they're doing. And part of the survey was also what game engines are you using now, and what game engines are you going to use for your next game. And 75% of the companies they spoke with are moving away from Unity in the next 2 to 3 years. Basically, they finish their current.
Do you think in a year from now, if they repeated that survey, they get the same results when enough time has passed and people have forgotten about this? Because a lot of these games that are in development are going to take 3-4 years, maybe even complete. So
I suspect it will, because again, of the devs I know have spoken to about this, we all have got long memories, and we remember how many times Unity has pulled this shit on us in the past. And everybody, they are right now taking the time to learn new game engines. My company is learning 3 new game engines as we speak.
So let's talk about that then. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Finish your sentence.
And my company is learning 3 new game engines as we speak. And other companies I know are also in the process of learning new game engines. Some have entirely abandoned Unity as it is. And I know at least one company who has told me when my company is able to publish games to Godot, they're going to abandon Unity as well. So among just the devs I know, and I know a lot of devs, most of them are no longer are moving away from Unity after the current title. And to prepare for that, they're already in the process of learning new engines. So a year from now, yes, I think it's going to be the same numbers, if not higher. So with companies like Cerulean Games, we are preparing for that, which is why we're learning new engines to make sure that we're able to port games to where the industry is going, which in the future is not going to be Unity. Unity is going to be a much more minimal energy and engine. I mean, energy too. Their energy.
But right now, Unity is the biggest engine in terms of market penetration. Now, all the big companies use their own, but in terms of the indie space, the mid-tier space, everyone's using Unity. Like now, some people are using Unreal, but Unity has the biggest penetration.
And I know other companies that they're already moving their in production titles to other engines because of this as well. So Unity is,
But is that worth the cost to do that if they're not going to be impacted unless they have to upgrade to the latest version? If they have something in
but
production right
again,
now, they
what
won't
is
need to change their version.
what's Unity going to change next year? We
So
don't
you're
know
saying
that.
this has nothing to do with the current policy and everything to do about trust in the company itself.
It is, and that was something that was actually also in their surveys was why are you going to be leaving for other game engines if you are? And the vast majority was lost trust in Unity.
That's too bad.
And I know that's for me. I don't really care what they change their current model to. They've done this so many times. And I mean, I have a lot of other reasons. I mean, Unity is, I know a lot of people don't agree with me. Unity is just not a great game engine in a lot of ways. I've had
I
to write
think
my own
actually,
tools.
I mean, I kind of disagree with you there. I mean,
I know a lot of people
is it
do, but
perfect?
like,
No, but for what it gives you, it's incredibly robust. You can do a
but, then,
lot with it. It is
but
a
a lot of what it
very,
gives you also, you have to strip out and write your own version of because what they give you bluntly doesn't work.
hey, Michael, I think I would frame that as maybe it's not the most performance implementation of certain things. And
Questionable
there's
decisions.
certainly bugs in a lot of it because I know I found them numerous times. I've had issues in older versions of Unity with nested prefabs, with colliders, with the Unity's lighting system.
Don't use Unity's lighting system.
Yeah,
That's rule one.
we'll talk about that one on another podcast.
Well, here, I would give you this
But
phrase that we can make a whole podcast out of, because this is one that I know a lot of game devs follow is if it ships with Unity, don't use it. But the one thing though, the point of all this though is that I've been using Unity since 2009. You know, I've known about the tools I'm not happy with, and I've been writing my own. I have a huge tool stack in Unity that we use, that we wrote internally. We can deal with the issues of Unity, the bugs in it. We can work around those. We've written our replacements for all of that. It's the trust in Unity's management that we cannot overlook any further. Their management, the way they're handling the engine, the way they're handling the users of the engine, and the way they want to work with us. That is something I cannot overlook any further. And I know a lot of others who feel the exact same way. And because of that, none of us care what they've changed that TOS changed to. We just care that they keep doing it and we're done. So because of that, we're moving on.
So let's talk about then what is the best replacement? Because I don't see Unreal as a big like it is probably the next best contender. Doesn't have a lot of I don't know Unreal well enough to comment strongly on it, but from my perception, it's not necessarily the best 2D engine. Godot is open source, so in terms of support and quality, I mean, I'm not saying I've never used Godot, but when you hear open source, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get.
Right.
So that stuff kind of concerns me. As a person who wants to focus on making games and not worrying about the platform I'm making them on, what is the next best thing? And how long is it going to take for the other platforms that aren't Unity to mature to a level that Unity is at today? And you then and to follow into that question, these like Godot is open source, so that's its own thing. But then you look at Unreal, that's owned by Epic. They are a private-owned company, so it's probably some private investment firms and some individuals with lots of money. They also have the Epic Game Store. They're also developers themselves, and their licensing fees are relatively cheap for their enterprise licenses. What, $1,500 a year, I think. So that's not unreasonable, but their revenue sources aren't their engine. So that means they aren't going to focus that much on their engine unless it benefits their own products, I suspect.
Okay, so this is definitely something I can talk about because, like I said, we've been learning multiple engines here at Cerulean to be able to support our clients importing whatever engine they want to work with. Now, I'll start by saying that with all the surveys I saw, they did say which engines people are moving to, and the vast majority that people are moving to is Unreal and Godot. Now, having that said, yeah, let's talk about the different engines a little bit. And I'm going to do my best not to do any favoritisms because I know which engines that I'm personally liking the most for what Drunk Robot Games is moving to in the future. Like I'll just say right now, we're primarily working in Unreal. But kind of to do a quick overview of each engine, I'll just start with Unreal because I mentioned it there. Unreal is fantastic. It probably has the most robust and stable tool set of any of the engines. Hi, Kitty. Including Unity. And one of the benefits there is that Epic Games makes their own games using their own technology, while not all companies do. Like Unity, that's something they've always been, it's always been slapped on them, is they don't make games with their tech. In fact, Unity, talking about Career for a second, Unity did once start making a game in their own engine, and they canceled it like 6 months later. And I'd have to look at the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, we found it just too hard to do. And I'm like, oh my God, you guys, seriously, if you said that, you got to look at your engine, how bad it is. Okay. I'm going to play that one favorite.
It's hard. Like
it is hard, but Unity just makes it so much harder, but you don't know that until you've used other engines. So back to the point at hand. So compared to other engines, I'm going to do this with each engine I talk about. Compared to other engines, Unreal's toolset I have personally found to be the most robust, the strongest, and the most stable. And compared to the other engines, you need to do the least development of tools on your own. They do have their marketplace, which you could compare to like the Unity Asset Store, but unlike the Unity Asset Store, where a lot of the assets are very inexpensive, but also not great, a lot of the things in the Unreal marketplace is more expensive, like $200 or $300, but they're also going to be rock solid with very good developer support. And that's an issue that I hear consistently said with Unity assets. There's no support for them. You can reach out to the developers, and a lot of times you're not going to get support. That's not true of all of them. I definitely get support. I mean, there's one that we're working with right now, working with Bakery and account support, and the Bakery developer has just been fantastic, just emailing them back and forth. But there's been other ones that we reached out to them for weeks and didn't get a single response, and we had to request a refund from Unity. But with Unreal, the marketplace, it just tends to be more robust as a result. But it's also because of those prices, I believe. You're going to get much stronger stuff there.
You're making a lot more money off of their assets, but the market penetration's less too, though. So
it's changing, though. There's a lot more people using Unreal than I think we know. And that's also because Unity is recognized more as something you can make a bunch of cheap little crappy phone games with. So a lot of people just grab that to do that. With Unreal, Unreal doesn't really have a phone market penetration, which is okay. That's not their world. Their world is more PC, Mac, and consoles. And for that, it's fantastic. And you mentioned 2D, and yes, they've done a lot of work on that. And as a result, their 2D support now is actually pretty good, but it's newer. So you don't really see a lot of 2D games produced yet. Now, yeah, like even doing Purrtato, like in Unreal, we're actually
moving to 2.5D is what you told me.
We're moving to 2.5D. Yeah, we're going to be doing 2D characters in a 3D world. And Unreal actually has like built-in open world support. So if you want to make like a Grand Theft Auto style game, there's literally a game template for that right there when you create a new project. So like Purrtato is going to be an open world project with 2D characters running around. Otherwise, the game is still going to be, the JRPG, Metroidvania. People
really like an open world. You're going to have it somewhat on Rails, aren't you?
Say it again.
You're going to summon on Rails, right? It's not.
It's going to be on Rails,
but the template is open world.
Right. So if you remember like Pandemonium from back in the day.
Oh yeah, I love that game.
Yeah, where you kind of move around, but you might be able to go like around a tower and the camera follows you. But the entire world itself takes place in one environment. So like you could get up to the top of the tower here, and you might see like the other side of the Isle of More. I'll use that open world technology, but it's still going to be side scrolling. But the point is, we can do that in Unreal, and it's kind of built in to do that.
Do you like Unreal, Elmo?
Other kids.
Cat's name is Elmo.
I think Elmo just wants food, Blair.
He doesn't get fed yet. It's not time for dinner.
Elmo and I are in the same place right there, let's be honest.
All right, okay, so what about Godot then? What about Godot?
Godot it's not a newer player in the industry, but it's become more recognized. And Godot is it's strong.
It looks
Um,
2D. 2D looks like it's a very like it in 2D space. It looks like it's pretty good.
it does it's great for 2D, and I didn't actually use Godot until earlier this year, so I've still been learning it. But one of the interesting things I found consistently with the devs I know, they all looked at Godot 2 years ago and said it's eh. I got into Godot and I was just mind blown. There was so much of Godot that was already so strong, and I remember going through the engine thinking, "Wow, I wish Unity did half of this stuff. It's so smooth and easy to use." Um, but the interesting thing is, again, saying those developers who hadn't last time they used it was 2 years ago, it has changed a lot in the past 2 years. But a lot of that does go to Microsoft, because Microsoft invested a big boatload of cash to help make sure it got I want to say Xbox, not Xbox support, better Windows support. I forget exactly what it was for, but I know they did a cash injection that helped a lot. And I was researching because, at the time of the Unity implosion, we're like, what engine are we going to internally move to? And we were looking at Godot for a bit. So we're like, okay, well, what can it do for 3D? Because we're working on various games. We have like a semi-unannounced horror titles we're working on so many Puppet Combo game ports. We're like, well, now we want to do our own because we got some fun ideas. It's going to be, a first-person horror adventure. So we're looking at that and other 3D things. So we start researching what Godot could do in 3D, and oh my god, it's good. It can push some pixels.
Is it like it can't be more mature than Unreal, I would expect.
Nothing is more mature than Unreal when it comes to 3D. I mean, nothing's going to beat Unreal for a long time unless they do a lot of work there. I mean, Unity's HDRP pipeline can.
Let me ask you this question, and then because we've been going for over an hour now, over an hour and 15 minutes almost.
We have other engines to discuss too.
Well, actually, okay. So you said
maybe that's another podcast.
You said okay. Well, actually, you've interrupted. Yeah, you've interrupted me there. So because you said you're working on 3, we've talked about Unreal, we've talked about Godot. What is the third?
We're actually working on others too. But real quick, we're also working with Game Maker, and we've touched Construct 3 a bit as well.
Okay, so because I'm aware of Game Maker and I've heard of Construct. I know very little about those. But let's maybe between Unity, Unreal, and Godot.
Mm-hmm.
Which one, in terms of maturity, support, community support, which is the best?
Between those 3, yeah, Unreal.
You think the community support and the customer support from Epic is better than what you get from Unity?
Well, the customer, okay, I mean, Unity's customer support, I unfortunately have to say, my experience in has been very poor. I've never been happy with Unity's customer support. Unreal's has always been very good. Because I've actually been using Unreal for over a year now. And so I've had a lot of, back and forth with them in the community. And yeah, for the most part, it's been good. I was part of a Discord that unfortunately was a little toxic internally, but that can be said of like any Discord at times.
In any community.
Yeah, any community. So I don't specifically blame the fact that was Unreal, just that it was just that Discord. But yeah, I've actually been very happy with it. And with Godot, I will say they're growing rapidly. Their documentation is actually very good. Unreal's documentation is very lacking, unfortunately. Their documentation is more a reference. Like, this is what the function is, not so much what it does. Unity definitely has the best documentation when it comes to those in all reality, but Godot's is really good. It's maybe comparable to Unity, and Godot's community has been very welcoming and very open and very easy to talk to. And I'm not saying Unreal's isn't, but they're also much larger. So you join a lot of these Unreal Discords and stuff. And there's one I joined that I think had something like 48,000 users. So it's very easy to also get what you're trying to talk about or ask about kind of lost in the shuffle. But Unreal also has a really good forum system. So I've been able to go there and ask a lot of questions. I haven't tried Godot's forum. I think they have one. I haven't checked, but I know with Godot, they also have some, like, there's a community I joined from theirs that was almost 20,000 people large. So it had some of the same issues with Unreal and getting answers. But again, Godot's documentation is so good. I've barely ever needed to go to a forum to ask a question. I can just go to the documentation and it's there. Unlike Unreal, where the documentation, like I said, it tells you what something is. It doesn't tell you what it does. So it's much harder to get the responses. But I've heard consistently in the community, especially with the Unity implosion, a lot of big Unreal developers have been saying, a lot more people are starting to pour into us because they're leaving Unity. And they're going to Epic saying, we have got to improve this documentation. That is the biggest hurdle we're suffering right now, or that new
So
developers.
Unreal and Godot and probably other engines are definitely taking the opportunity that happened with Unity to
They are,
increase their customer base and
they've been given a
improve
lot
the
of money.
products.
Like I know Godot, they were given a ridiculous amount of money by I forget the developer right now. Oh no, the Terraria developer. The Terraria dev doesn't even use Unity. Well, they use it for some mobile stuff, but they don't even use Unity for the most part. And they donate $100,000 to Godot and I think Default, which is another engine.
Well, what do they use? Do they use Godot or?
I believe they use Game Maker, but I'm not entirely sure. But they recognize the Unity implosion as being such a big deal. They wanted to help other engines to start being built to help take Unity's place. So they gave $100,000 separately to both those engines, and they said they're going to continue to support with like $5,000 a month after that for each engine. So, and that's not the only case of that happening. So
Okay.
yeah, they're going to start getting they're already getting a lot of support to help grow them.
So, okay. Now, I think we're going to wrap up pretty quick here. But the last question, what advice do you have for someone who is still working in Unity? Because there are a lot who are a little scared by what happened this year, to port their game to another engine, whether it be Unreal, Godot, or something else, Game Maker, whatever, because that's not a small undertaking. And it could derail a project. A lot of these people don't have resources to do this. So what do you tell them? But what can they do, if anything? How much is this going to cost?
The obvious answer is come to me. My company will take care of it for you.
Well, that's fair.
Doing it yourself. Yeah, there actually is some very good stuff you could do. I mean, first off, I'd say look at the engines and, like for example, Unreal and Godot. You take those, spend a little time doing the starter tutorials for both and see which one feels right for you. Because a lot of these engines, they have very similar features. Like Unreal is easier to port to consoles. Godot is a little bit harder. But if you're probably going to hire a company to do that for you because taking games to consoles is really, really hard. So if that's a concern, look at Unreal more than Godot. Otherwise, if you're going to hire a company, just take that off your plate and don't worry about it. Let us worry about it for you. Do some initial tutorials for the engine. See which one feels right to you. And then also look at what it's like doing the code. Like if you're in on Unity and you do a lot in Playmaker or other visual scripting engines, focus on Unreal's blueprint system. Godot, I honestly don't know if they have a visual scripting plugin, but they have a lot of plugins I haven't looked at. So look at those. If you're doing a lot in C#, learn a lot more of the C++ side in Unreal. It's scary at first, but it's honestly not that bad because Unreal has done, they have a lot of built-in.
Godot supports C# though as well, right?
Godot does have a C#. I'm sorry, that's what Microsoft invested in. They put a bunch of money in Godot a while back to get .NET support into Godot. So yeah, Godot has C#. So a lot of times, you can pretty much just copy paste your code directly into Godot. You just need to modify any direct Unity specific.
Any reference to game objects.
Right.
Which there are numerous.
There are, but the Godot is written in a way that's not that difficult to move all that over. It will probably take you less time than you think. If you're moving that from C# into C++ in Unreal, it's going to take longer, but realistically, it's not going to be as bad as you think also because Epic has done a fantastic job of writing a lot of what we engineers like to call syntax sugar into Unreal's code. Kind of like how Unity has like game object and stuff and mono behavior that sort of wrapped a lot of C# or native functions. Unreal's done the same. And Unreal has a lot of classes as well that sort of handle those pointers, memory management for you very, very well. It's just a matter of learning those. Like you're going to want to use T arrays rather than other things, and F strings rather than strings, because those are Unreal's version of those that have a lot of that syntax sugar built in, a lot of that memory management built in. So yeah, just take some time to learn the found. I'm not saying you learn how to build a game engine. I'm saying learn a baseline, do some tutorials, see what feels great. And then from there, see what it's going to take for you to move what you've built. Because what you build is going to be different from what I built, from what everybody else has built. So it's going to take for you to build. Like if you're working like on a game like Purrtato Tale, where you're using Spine for everything, does the engine you're looking at support Spine, or does it not? Or does it have something already built in? Like Unreal pretty much has
You could raster Spine to actual sprites though too, if you really wanted to. So
you can, yeah, and that should be part of your considerations. And I'll say don't take it lightly either. Like really good devs, they write stuff that can be reused. And I know John Romero, I think it was.
Not always. It depends on what's going on.
It depends what's going on, how much crunch. Realistically, you want to try and write things that you can reuse. That's one of the reasons that my company, we can do things so quickly. Like I know a lot of people go, how can you do so much with such a small team? And one of the ways is we write code that can be reused between projects. So I say that because whatever engine you pick realistically is probably going to be the engine you're using for multiple projects moving forward, whether you're reusing code or not, just because it's what you're now comfortable with. That's why a lot of people stuck with Unity for so long, despite complaining that they don't want to use it anymore. Because it's what they were comfortable with. It's why I didn't move from Unity for so long. So keep that in mind also. Don't just think about the game you're porting and working on today. Think about your next 3 games. What, is this the engine you feel is going to be right for those? Is it something you want to continue to expand what you're building on for those as well? And if you take those things in mind, you can probably choose the engine you want to move to within a few weeks. And don't take it lightly. Don't rush the decision. And remember, there's more than just Unreal and Godot. There are many others out there. I'd say your biggest consideration really is if you want to be able to do consoles in the future. But again, don't worry so much about that. A good console porting company like Cerulean Games will worry about that for you. You just bring your game to us and we'll figure out how to get it working on the consoles. Think about what you're building now. Think about your next 3 games and make a decision. And if you have any questions about what's best, feel free to go to a company that's been porting games in between engines. Message me. I'll be happy to give you some advice based on your specific individual needs on what you're working on.
On that note, though, how can people get a hold of you? Let's give your social medias, your website, everything else. Yeah. Let's let our listeners reach out to you.
The best place to reach out to me is on Twitter at Red Vonix. I'm also on Blue Sky or something?
I don't know what that is.
Some other social media service apparently everybody's been moving to. And the last time I was there, I saw like 5
Twitter and Threads and whatever, or X or whatever. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm Red Vonix there also. I'm on Instagram, though don't message me on Instagram. I don't respond to anything there because I get too much spam. You can also find Drunk Robot Games. Oh, and also redvonix.com on the internets. drunkrobotgames.com, ceruleangames.com. Same thing on Twitter and Instagram. Drunk Robot Games on Twitter, Drunk Robot Games on Instagram, Cerulean Games on Twitter. Of course, if you have a project you need worked on, a game you need ported to consoles, go to ceruleangames.com. We have a form you can fill out, or just message me directly. I'm easy to talk with. I don't bite unless you ask me to nicely. And of course, you can find Runic through Drunk Robot Games, drunkrobotgames.com. And of course, you can also find the companies we worked with to do our voiceover acting, which we're going to be announcing our voiceover artists. We have a surprisingly famous group of actors that my mind is blown. We still have them working for us. But you can go to Ascendant Animation, and you can also look up Lemon Toast Media, or the Lemon Toast Media Group, I believe it's called. They are available, also on the internet, on the web, on Twitter. Make sure you look up Steve Working Nunez, who runs Ascendant Animation, and he is just an amazing film actor, voiceover artist. If you need voices done, please go to Ascendant Animation. They will knock it out of the park and get you some incredible talents.
Sounds awesome. Red, thank you so much for joining us again. We will definitely have you back. We seem to have you back once a year at least, so we'll have you back
I've been
again
right back
next year.
twice a year. I've got
You are
time.
you're a colorful character.
Yeah, we're looking forward to when Runic's released, come back and we'll talk about that. And I would love to talk a lot more about some of this engine stuff and
Yeah.
actually what your experience porting Purrtato has been like to Unreal, because I think that
I'd
would
be
be good
happy to.
information for people to have.
And we do have our first Unreal game of our own shipping early next year, which is going to be a small horror title, because we're trying to get something else pretty quickly so
Right.
we can show the world that yes, we actually can release and do Unreal games, because we kind of need to be able to prove that out. So
Right.
I'd be happy to talk about that as well. And I've been using Unreal for the past year on some other stuff. So, but yeah, and it's a pleasure coming here and chatting with y'all. It's always full of laughs and crying and anger, mostly Unity. But it's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really enjoy it.
Thanks, Red, and we'll talk to you again soon.
And to everyone, and all the viewers out there, I don't know when you're going to watch this, but right now it's just before the holidays. So have a happy holidays to all of you and a happy new year. And catch you on the Twitters or the blue skies or just
on that note, happy holidays to everyone.
Dude, are you Red Vonix? I'm like, that's me. I'm running another meeting. Run with me. We'll chat.
All right, Red. We'll talk to you again soon. Take
All
care.
right.
See y'all.